Rabbi Sachs said something very interesting um, as he introduced the Haftarah earlier. He said, one of the sad parts of the Haftarah for this week, which we don't read every year, this is a Haftarah that only comes up once in a while, because usually this week is a double parsha. It's the story of Yiftach, and Rabbi Sachs said the Haftarah sort of misses the best part of the whole story. If you followed along and paid attention to the ending, there's a vow that Jephthah makes. He says, if you deliver me in this battle, the first thing that comes out of my, speaking to God, right? Deliver me in this battle, the first thing that comes out of my house will be, I offer to God, expecting that it was going to be an animal of some sort. It ended up being, this is not in the Haftarah, it ended up being his daughter. And it's a really interesting story, as Rabbi Sachs says, about the power of words. So why would the rabbis have chosen, would our tradition have chosen to cut off the Haftarah at the best part, at the most interesting part? Hirsch has a suggestion, yeah? Okay, that's actually a good suggestion. Hirsch says it's because Haftarah tends to Haftarot tend to conclude on notes of consolation. He called it an upper, but it's supposed to be consoling a Haftarah. That's true. Haftarot should end on positive notes, and that would have been negative. I have a different explanation. I think that it actually relates to the Torah reading. The Torah reading, its most powerful story, is the story of Moses and his mistake in hitting the rock. What is God's command to Moses at the beginning of the Parsha? He doesn't say hit the rock. God says, speak to the rock and let the water come forth. My hypothesis is that since the Torah reading emphasizes the importance of words, we didn't want a Haftarah reading that diminishes the importance of words. And if the lesson in the Haftarah is be very, very careful with what you have to say, actually the lesson in the Torah reading is how beautiful and important good words, proper words can be in the right situation. Wouldn't make sense to have a Torah and Haftarah reading with two completely different morals to their stories. Miriam dies. Miriam is always been associated with water in the Jewish tradition. When she dies, no wonder there's no more water. As I said, God's command, speak to the rock, let the water come forth, and the tragedy is that Moses hits it, and God says, you did not believe in me to sanctify me, and so you will not be allowed into the land. There's so much commentary and interpretation on this story. You might say almost more than any other in the whole Torah, because it's such a tragedy. And there's tremendous debate in Jewish literature. What did Moses do that was so bad? So he hit the rock instead of speaking to it. Is that such a big deal? And why such a terrible punishment? Moses, whose calling as a leader was to bring the people into the land, it was all about the destination, gets this terrible punishment that devastates him right until the end of his life. You will not be able to enter the land. You will not be able to see the destination that I have been promising to take you and the people to. Does it seem like the punishment fits the crime? I don't know. but I want to offer one take on the story that I thought was particularly interesting, and I hope you all find it interesting too. To understand this take, I need to turn to another story in rabbinic literature, one of my favorites. It's a story of how Rabbi Akiva's tenure begins, how Rabbi Akiva's learning begins. Some of you know Rabbi Akiva, the greatest of the rabbis. He lived in the first century and was basically illiterate until reaching the age of 40 years old. So this Akiva, who becomes in his day like a Moses, the great teacher of Torah, what was his beginning? Does anyone know the story of the beginning of Rabbi Akiva? What was it that inspired him to change his life? Rabbi Akiva was a shepherd, says the story. It's found in Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is a late midrashic work. It's about the 8th century, Avot de Rabbi Natan, a great collection of Jewish stories with lots of morals in it. Rabbi Akiva was a shepherd and spent a lot of time outside, like all shepherds do. So I thought it would be a nice story because here we are outside, and it's always an opportunity to remind ourselves that there are so many lessons in nature that have been absorbed in Judaism over the centuries and that ought to continue to be absorbed. And sometimes we don't get those messages because we live lives, especially in Toronto, that are often too confined indoors. Well, Rabbi Akiva's great revelation took place outside. The story is that one time he was standing at the mouth of a well, and he noticed a stone that was carved very unusually. Its shape was very unusual. And he asked one of the people who was sitting near the well. The well was a gathering place in those days, so he asked one of the people who was sitting there, this beautiful stone, how did it come to be? I've never seen a stone carved so uniquely. So who carved this beautiful rock? And they said to him, it was the water. It dripped and dripped and fell continuously on this stone every day. They even quoted to him a verse from the book of Job, Avanim shachaku mayim, water wears away stones. And Rabbi Akiva was left with this powerful image in his mind, drips of water, which water is light and seems not sharp at all. And here was a stone whose shape was completely changed by just a consistent drop of water falling at the same place, day after day, moment after moment. And he thought to himself, what wisdom there must be in this Judaism. Avanim shachaku mayim. Water can change a stone. Maybe my heart, which can be like a stone, can be carved by slow drips of learning that I take on every day. It was that image of water dripping on a stone that changed Rabbi Akiva's life, that created the great rabbi who sustained Judaism through some of its most difficult days. The moral of the story is never to forget the power of slow, incremental growth. Water that can wear away at stones. It's like Torah and mitzvot, which do not transform a person through sharp, unyielding power. They change a person softly and slowly. They make harmony out of the messiness of life. So listen to something interesting here. Rabbi Akiva was how old, I said, when he had this revelation? He was 40 years old. How old were the Jewish people in the incident at the waters of Meribah that we read today, when Moses hits the rock? How old were the Jewish people? They were 40 years old. It was 40 years since they had escaped from, or that they were delivered from Egypt. The same. And Maimonides sees the connection. He says the two stories, at the waters of Meribah and at Rabbi Akiva's well, are about the same thing. Moses got it wrong. Rabbi Akiva got it right. These are stories about patience. God wanted at the waters of Meribah to have a symbol that would last for generations. Moses speaking to the rock and watching its slow drip of water. Torah and mitzvot come out of it and quench everybody's thirst. But Moses was old, and Moses had had enough of the people and their complaints. He was probably very tired and impatient. And his hitting of the rock wasn't really about the action. It was about what motivated the action. Impatience, the desire for instant gratification. It took centuries and centuries for Rabbi Akiva, who is often compared to Moses, to change the image, to teach something different. That the Torah is not there to be hit upon. It's not a COVID vaccine that you just get 2 shots of and you're cured. It's meant to be a slow drip, this religion, where practices develop and grow every single day and will shape your heart, even if you think that you have a heart of stone, even if you think you have character traits that will never change, even if you think you are who you are and you will just always be the same. When water can drip on something every day, it will change it. My cousin studies at a yeshiva in Israel, and the image in this very sort of, I visited him a couple years ago, and yeshivas are not meant to be beautiful places, they're just houses of learning. But in his yeshiva in the old city of Jerusalem, they chose to have one artistic piece to inspire all the students who are learning there. What is it? You can visit it yourselves, by the way. One of our members endowed this yeshiva, so I can get you special access. It is a rock and a slow drip of water coming down and shaping the rock. It's the story of Rabbi Akiva that is meant to inspire all the learners every single day. There are people today here who are listening to the service who are just starting their Jewish journey. You must feel sometimes, as you're encountering Judaism, that this is too complicated and too difficult. The service is all in Hebrew. What was that Torah reading? Who are all these people? What really is the rabbi talking about when he says rabbinic literature and midrash? I mean, I get it. It's a really complicated religion. And Moses sort of gave up and said, it's too complicated. I'll just hit it and let the water come forth. Don't be like Moses in that moment. Rabbi Akiva changed our view, and he gave us the right image of Judaism. Drip by drip by drip by drip. This is a religion and a way of life that will change your life and make you a better person. I am lucky. I have a little image of myself now of a slow drip changing a life. Some of you have asked about our little baby. So if you go visit him in the NICU, this is what they do at the Sunnybrook NICU. The baby is in his incubator, But right next to the incubator is a digital scale. Every day we go to my wife goes, I need to go more often, I told you that. But my wife goes and she takes a picture for me of the scale, measuring him in grams. Like you measure, what else is measured in grams? Crackers, okay? Measured in grams. And every day we go back, and the number, almost every day, is a little bit higher than the day before. We all started out that way, whether there was a digital scale attached to our incubators or not. We all started out with little bits of incremental growth that created the people that we are today. The worst thing to do in Judaism is to unplug the scale and say, my spiritual growth is over. That's it. I am who I am. The scale of our spiritual lives is meant to grow and grow and grow, and we all have to head in that direction. Quick fixes are what the world is trying to sell us on. We have gotten through this pandemic with apps on our phone that we just touch, and the food that we'd like to eat is delivered to our door within a few minutes. But it plays with our mind to think that this is the way things ought to be. If it's not instant gratification, it's not worthwhile. So we have Parashat ukkat to give us a whole other image of the way we need to approach life. As our world reopens, we're going to have opportunities to go back to the routines, I hope, that have sustained us and can continue to sustain us. One of them is coming to synagogue. Daily minyan, putting on tefillin. These aren't things that'll change your life in one moment, but if you do them every day, it will change your life, drip by drip by drip. I need to lose weight because I've been eating way too much during this pandemic. So I have a choice. Either I can do a 7-day power diet, or I can just decide to eat healthy and exercise every day. Just to give you more of a down-to-earth example of the choices we have. Slow and steady wins the race. Or as Voltaire put it, I found a beautiful quote from him. Perfection is attained by slow degrees. It requires the hand of time. Rabbi Akiva got that message. The Torah understood it even earlier than Voltaire. None of us can get to perfect, but may our scales be headed in the right direction, be headed towards better and better and better, always inspired by what has come before us and what we can hopefully pass on to those who come after. Shabbat Shalom.